Good morning, good morning.
Good morning.
Pum, 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 pum. All right. Bum, bum, bum. All right. With the help of Hashem, we are learning ERUVIN Daf Ayin Zayin. We learned the Mishnah yesterday when there was a koisel, when there's a wall in between two chatzeros. So we spoke about a wall that's 10 tfachim high. Any wall that's not even 10 tfachim high is not considered b'chlal a separation between the two chatzeros, and therefore both chatzeros must join in the same eruv. If there is a wall that's 10 tfachim high, and the Mishnah added a detail, and it's also 4 tfachim deep, which means that the top of the koisel is a bona fide standalone domain. It's a reshus hayachid. It's 4 by 4 tfachim, and it's surrounded, so to say, by mechitzos of 10 tfachim. So says the Mishnah, even though both sides may not join in the same eruv, but being that the top of the wall is a standalone reshus hayachid, if there is the example the Mishnah gives are peiros that are already on top of the wall, members of both chatzeros are allowed to go up and to eat the fruit on top of the wall. Now we're going to begin today. The Gemara is going to ask, and what's going to happen if the depth or if the thickness of the wall is not 4 by 4 tfachim? And as we learned a lot of Masechta Shabbos, when you have an area that can be 10 tfachim off the ground, or that is encircled with mechitzos of 10 tfachim, but if it's less than dalid by dalid, less than arba'ah tfachim, that is called a makim ptur. What's going to happen if the top of the wall is a makim ptur? You would think, well, I'm a chayid, then there's avada, no problem. Let's see. We're going to have min hakatza el hakatza, and machlokes between Rav and Rabbi Yechanan. We will then have interesting cases, and pictures will be helpful when there's going to be two chatzeros, a wall in between them, but being that the height of the floor of the chatzeros are not the same, so the same wall for one chatzer is 10 tfachim off the ground, but for the other chatzer, the wall is not 10 tfachim off the ground. And we're going to have a similar case when you're going to have a ditch, a charitz in the ground, that's 10 tfachim deep, only for one side, only for one chatzer, not for the other chatzir. We're going to learn how could one diminish the height of the wall, not by knocking the wall down, but by lifting the earth right near the wall. It's called to be mema'et, to reduce the height of the wall. We're going to see how this will create a leniency, a advantage for that chatzir. Can you use a keli? We're going to therefore get into a certain dinim of muktzah. We're going to chazar over the concepts of tiltul min hatzad, or sometimes called kala achayad. We're going to have the klal that kol davar hanitel b'Shabbos, if anything is allowed to be moved on Shabbos. So if you have a keli leaning against the wall, but you will be allowed to move it, it doesn't halachically reduce the height of the wall. We're going to learn other details of mi'ut. If you're going to have a platform that's not laying on the ground, but it's on legs. In other words, it's like, a big stool or even a ladder, but the first rung is 3 tfachim or more above the ground, then it's not mema'et. In other words, we're going to basically spend a whole daf learning of halachic mechanisms to reduce the height of the wall, rendering it, at least for one chatzir, less than 10 tfachim, and we'll begin today's sugya to see what is the advantage of that. So Chavra Daf Ayin Vav Amid Beis, right all the way in the bottom, 3 lines before the bottom of the Amid, in the beginning of the Gemara. Case of the Mishnah there was a wall, 10 tfachim tall, 4 tfachim deep. The Mishnah says that both sides, elu oilin mikan va'oichlin, ve'elu oilin mikan va'oichlin, each one can go up and eat that which was already on the wall. Guys, appreciate the fact that the Mishnah does not say that people can carry from the chutzner to the top of the wall. That's called ma'alin. The Mishnah doesn't say ma'alin. The Mishnah says elu oilin. If something was already on top of the wall, then members of both chatzeros can go up and eat it on the wall itself. Says the Gemara, what happens if if the thickness of the wall is not 4 tfachim, which will then render the top of the wall as a makom ptur. Now, normally, a makom ptur, not only can you carry in a makom ptur, you can carry onto a makom ptur. Nevertheless, Amarav, that in such a case, Avir Shtei Reshuyo Sholtos Boy, being that this wall is in between two chatzeros, we will therefore say that if it isn't a Reshus Bifnei Atzmai, we're going to say the top of the wall is subside, so to say, it belongs to both chatzeros. Now, once you have a wall that's 10 tvachim tall, I don't care how thin it is, if there isn't any doors or windows, then these two chatzeros may not join in an eruv, which means that members of one chatzer cannot carry things from their chatzer to the neighboring chatzer. So if we view, which is Rav saying the top of the wall is butter-like, belongs to, is an extension of both chatzeros, it traps carrying anything on top of the wall, because then it's keilu you're carrying it from one chatzer to another chatzer, and therefore lo yazis ba yafilu malaynimam. Lo yazis doesn't mean that you cannot move. You can walk. I can walk from my chatzer to your chatzer. I can walk in a Rosh Hashanah. It means that if there are peiros there, can't move it. How ironic that rendering the top of the wall into a makom ptur brings about a tremendous chumrah. That's one side. That's Rav. Ayin Zayin. Rabbi Yochanan Amar minakotza lakotza punkt fakert. Not only since it is a makom ptur, are you allowed to carry peiros that are on the wall, but even more. Elu malin mikan. Members of one chutzit can actually carry from their chutzit to the top of the wall. They can bring up food. In the Mishnah, they were not allowed to bring up food. The Mishnah didn't say malin. The Mishnah says elu oilin mikan v'oichlin. They can eat that which was already in there. Here they can carry it up. Elu malin mikan v'oichlin and ve'elu malin mikan v'oichlin, because you are always allowed to carry even from a reshus harabim into a makom ptur. Asks the Gemara, and the first is that an attempted refutation against Rabbi Yochanan. Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah, Elu oilim mikan v'oichlin, ve'elu oilim mikan v'oichlin. And the Gemara is medayik, oilin ein. What does that imply? You can go up. You may go up, but ma'alin loy. Ma'alin, to be able to carry, is a greater leniency than you just going up. So the Gemara says, and Hanami, the case of the Mishnah, which taka, you are correctly implying, you are learning that malin loy, that's only because it's a reshus b'fnei atzmai. Hachikamad, yesh v'yarba al arba, taka oilin in, but malin loy. But our case, ein v'yarba al arba, dafka, because it's not a reshus b'fnei atzmai, therefore ma'alin nami. Now, just to make something clear, carrying from a chatzit into a standalone Reshus HaYachid is certainly not Asr D'Oraisa. Not only that, according to Rab Shimon, you even midrabanan you can do that. We're speaking about the accepted shita that unless you make an eruv between two different Reshuyos HaYachid, if they do not belong to the same owner or to the same owners, then you may not carry from one to the other. Very good. And now the Gemara says further, V'az Rabbi Yochanan Tamei. The Chiyasi Rabdimi, when he came to Babel, and he wrote with us the Torah that he learned in Eretz Yisrael, and he also quoted Rabbi Yochanan that Makim She'im By Arba Al Arba. What are we referring to? So Rashi's second line from the top of the Amid tells us we're speaking about a Amud. We're speaking about a beam that is situated between Reshus HaYachid and Reshus HaRabim. And we want to know whether members of both these Reshuyos can derive benefit from this Amud. Like if they're walking, can they lean their back on it to readjust it? And why not? Well, any Amud, a Makim, She'ein By Arba Al Arba, it's considered a Makim Ptur. And Rabbi Yochanan says, Muter, both Livnei Reshus HaRabim and Ulivnei Reshus HaYachid, they can adjust their backpack on it. Even though when they rest that which is in the backpack on this pillar, they're making a hanacha. Nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong going from a Reshus HaYachid, Akira b'Reshus HaYachid, Hanocha b'Makim Tur. Akira b'Makim Reshus HaRabim, Makim Tur, and vice versa. Ubelvat shelo yachlifu. Now, what may not be done, midrabanan, is that don't find a way of carrying something from a Reshus HaYachid to a Reshus HaRabim through the Makim Tur, like taking it from Reshus HaYachid, putting it on the Makim Tur, then lifting it off the Makim Tur, putting it down into the Reshus HaRabim. That's something that may not be done midrabanan, because that might lead you to go straight from one Reshus HaYachid to Reshus HaRabim. But as long as you are not using it as a step to go to the other Reshus, you can use a Makim Tur. It can be in service of, you can carry into both from a Reshus HaYachid and from the Reshus HaRabim. So why would this be different? You know, my friends, here it's even better. Here on a biblical level, you're not doing anything wrong. In other words, even if you were to go straight from one chutzner to the other chutzner, I know there's a wall and the wall has no chaloin, and that's us in midrabanan, but here it's only in isur derabanan. So what this is going to be more stringent than this makim in between Reshus HaYachid and Reshus HaRabim, and l'chora, that will have to be shitas Rav. Rav is being so machmir here. So the Gemara indeed asks, Rav leis leil Rav Dimi. Says the Gemara, no, Rav agrees with this din of Rav Dimi, which means that Rav will agree with this din of Rabbi Yechanan. If it's a makim bein Reshus HaYachid and Reshus HaRabim, Rav is moida. Both members of the Reshus HaYachid and of the Reshus HaRabim may be makatev on this makim. Which is the Oiraisa Hachinami. What's the downside? What's the fear that a person might end up carrying directly from Reshus HaYachid to Reshus HaRabim? Rav, like Rabbi Yechanan, is not afraid of that, because everyone knows that from Reshus HaYachid to Reshus HaRabim is an Isur D'Oraisa. People will never end up violating an Isur D'Oraisa. So there's no need to put a fence around something that no one will violate. But over here, what are we talking about? A wall in between two chatzeres. Over here, midoiraisa, I can carry from one chatzer into another chatzer directly. The Shuis is the Rabbanan. So Rav is afraid that if one were to allow to carry from the chatzer into a makim tur, being that then taking it from the top of the wall and bringing it down to the other chatzer is no violation at all. And even if you were to go directly, it's only an isur derabanan. So here we have this klal that we apply so many times, that the chachamim asu chizuk l'devreim yoser mishal toidam, precisely because in the worst case scenario, it's only an isur derabanan. Yeah, people are going to only violate an isur derabanan, and to prevent for that happening, Rav stands his ground, and he's actually more machmir when the thickness of the wall does not have the 4 tfachim. When you have a makim ptur, then not only may you not use the top of that wall, you may not even carry from either of the chatzeros onto the wall, or something that was on top of the wall from when Shabbos began may certainly not be brought down to either side, to either of these chatzeros. Very good. Now says the Gemara, Amar Rabba, Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav Nachman. It's easy to imagine this in your head, but if someone has a picture will be always more helpful. This will be the Pesach to the whole daf today. We're going to be speaking about, can you diminish the height of the wall? We're going to get to that in a moment. Now you'll see the advantage of it. Koisel shebein shtei chatzeros. This case of Rav Nachman is going back to the koisel of the Mishnah. The wall is 4 tfachim deep, right? And what did we learn in the Mishnah? What would we just medayik? Even though l'kula alma, you can use peiros or anything else that is already on top of the wall, but we made the proper inference. One may not be ma'alin, amen machatzit, and there's a wall that is a Reshus HaYachid b'fnei atzmai. I may not carry anything up from my chatzir to the top of the wall. Or no one can take something that's on top of the wall, peiros, and bring it down to either of the chatzeros, because the top of the wall is a Reshus b'fnei atzmai. So what happens if you have such a wall? But tzidoi echad gevay asar tfachim. If you're standing in one of the 2 chatzeros and you measure the height of the wall will be 10 tfachim tall. But v'tzidoi echad shavel haaretz. But if you were to measure from the other side, shavel haaretz doesn't mean it's exactly aligned with the ground. there will be no chiddush. It means that if the chatzeros are built on a hill, and the wall can be built, if you see a picture, you'll see how this works. It can be done in a way, from one side it's 10 tvachim, from the other side it's 9.5 tvachim. It's just less than 10 tvachim. Now less than 10 tvachim means that from their perspective, the top of the wall is what? What would that be considered? Now, normally, if you have a place that's 4 by 4, right? That's 4 by 4, and it's not 10 tvachim tall. Normally, that's called a karmelis. But what will be machadish over here is that if the top of the wall is a lot more accessible, if it's a lot easier for one side to use it versus the other, we give it over to that chutzner. We will halachically consider now the top of the wall as part of the chutzner, which doesn't have to go 10 tvachim to get to the top of it. And therefore, we give it to them. And what's the benefit of giving it to them? In the Mishnah, when the kaisel was 4 tvachim deep, oichlin, but not ma'alin. If you give it to them, then they can ma'alin. It becomes like part of the chutzner. Then they will be allowed to carry from their chutzner to the top of the wall, or from the top of the wall back into the chutzner, only to that side. And why is that? Why do they own it more than the others? They both equally build a wall. Mishum tahava lozeh tashmishoy benachas. Tashmishoy, guys, doesn't mean using it as a shelf. You can argue, rightfully so. Guys, you know how high 10 tvachim is? 10 tvachim, what is 32 inches? 10 tvachim is 39 inches. 10 tvachim is the height of your table. If you're using something as a shelf, the lower something is, it becomes harder to use it. You have to bend down more. The tashmishoy that the Gemara is speaking about, as many achronim point out, is stepping on it. Yeah, when you have a top of a wall and space is of value, you want to use more space, some place that you can step onto easier, that's called tashmishoy benachas. And you know what? If something is not 10 tvachim tall, it's like a tall step. Once it's 10 tvachim, it's already not a step. That's the meaning over here. Thank you for the picture. It's more difficult, perfect picture. It's more difficult, guys, to step on it. That's the meaning, to walk on it. You see, the guys who live on the bottom, if they were to want to walk on the wall, the only problem with this picture is that the wall looks very thin. Imagine the wall is very thick, and you can take a walk on it. So we give it to here in the picture to the chutzner, to the left, because there is a cloud that the whole lezeh benachas ulezeh b'kasher noisnin oisay lezeh shetashmisha benachas. Okay, once we have this din, now we'll appreciate the whole end of the daf. Everything we'll learn today will be in this context. Because remember that klal, that when you have a wall in between two chatzeros, and the wall is thick 4 tvachim or a lot more. So in the case of the Mishnah, if the wall is equally above the ground 10 tvachim from both sides, then the top of the chutzner is a reshus b'fnei atzmai. Now you can, once something is in there, you can keep it in there, you can walk on top of it, but you can't carry from the chutzner to the top of the wall. If one side will have the top of the wall within 10 tvachim of the ground, then halachically we will give it to them. It will be considered part of their chutzner. And that will serve them, that they will not only be allowed to use that which is already on the top, but they will be allowed to be ma'alin anything from the chutzner to the top of the wall, and to take anything from the top of the wall only into their chutzner. What says the Gemara, Amar Rav Shizvi, Amar Rav Nachman, same concept, but in the reverse. Charetz shebein shnei chatzeros. If you have a ditch, the ditch that's running across the entire length of the expanse of both chatzeros, as you have in the picture. And the same concept is that if the depth of the chiritz is 10 tvachim and the width of the chiritz is 4 tvachim, guys, if the width of the chiritz is less than 4 tvachim, which means that members of one chutzner can simply step over it with ease, then I don't care how deep the chiritz is, it's garnished. But once the chiritz is 4 tvachim wide or more, you can't ignore that. If it is 10 tvachim deep, it's a koisel in the ground. It separates both chatzeros, which means that members of both chatzeros may not join the same eruv. So they didn't. And now the same question, is anyone allowed to use the bottom of the ditch? Can you carry from your chutzner to the bottom of the ditch? Same exact scenario. If the chalitz is deep in the ground, 10 tfachim, regardless from which chutzner you're measuring it, then, like in the Mishnah, no one can carry from the chutzner down into the ditch. No one can carry from the chalitz onto the chutzner. But yes, since the inside of the chalitz is a reshus hayachad b'fnei atzmai, oichlin, if something is already there, you can eat it in there, you can carry it in there. But now, same thing, from the guys on the right in the picture, they don't need to go 10 tfachim down to get to the bottom of the ditch. So we give it to them. Again, they get to use it. Shovel audits, again, doesn't mean shovel audits and pshita. Shovel audits means that it's a ditch, but it's less than 10 tfachim. So noisnin, oislein lezeh shovel audits, mishum dahavale lezeh tashmishay benachas, ulezeh tashmishay bekasha, v'chulei, as we just learned above, of the klal, that whenever you have such a scenario, you give it lezeh shetashmishay benachas. So asks the Gemara, why did we have to teach both dinim? Aren't they mamish the same? No, they're not the same. Bitzricha, the iyashmein only in the kaisel. I would argue, mishum de begoiva mishtamshe insha, people regularly use the top of the wall, stepping on top of it. That's why, since it's close to them, it's within 10 tfachim, it becomes halachically an extension of the chutzner. Avol, you might have thought that when it comes to a chutzner, to a ditch, since it's going down, it's subterranean, people don't make that much use of that which is inside the ground, so maybe we give it to neither of them. So therefore we have to opine, we do give it to them. And the iyashmin, and only in the chalitz, I would say, mishum, even though people don't regularly use it, but when they do, they don't feel anxiety. Because when you go into a ditch, you can't fall. You already fell. You're already in the red. Top of the wall, maybe there's a certain amount of anxiety. People are not going to be that comfortable to walk on something that's 10 tfachim tall or on any tfachim tall. So even though de facto people use it, but maybe it's still going to be a standalone reshus. Doesn't cause anxiety. Heights, people are afraid of heights. Since there is that type of anxiety, it's not given over to them either. That in both cases, if the top of the wall or the bottom of the ditch for one side only is less than 10 tfachim, it becomes here an extension of their chatzir, even though both chatzeros are not doing an eruv, but that chatzir is allowed not only to use inside of it, but they can carry from their chatzir to it or from it to the chatzir. So now, many understand this now to be a braisa. Now we see the advantage in these cases, and it was so common for people to have chatzeros and for there to be a koisel, and most koisels didn't have chaloinos. People wanted their own chatzir standalone. They didn't want to merge with others. Physically, they wanted more privacy. But it is a tremendous advantage for you to have the top of the wall with less than 10 tfachim. You gain the whole top of the wall. So now, says the Braisa, if you want to diminish the height of the wall, how would you diminish it? Very simple. If the wall is exactly 10 tfachim, or just a bit more than that, I can pile dirt, I can put stones. We'll see a whole different scenarios. I can maybe put a ladder, I can put a stand. If I put something that is on the ground, and if I'm standing now near the wall, because I built like this little mound, so the ground from the top of the wall now is less than 10 tfachim, that's a phenomenal way of being memayit, the wall, mitzad echad, benefiting members of this chatzah. So says the Braisa, im yesh b'miyutei arba'a. Here is the key. We're learning the Gemara Lashitas Rashi. According to Rashi, even though there's going to be one apparent challenge from Daf Ayin Ches on top, which we'll get to today, God willing, but it's not about, if this is the wall, it's not about how far away does it go from the wall, the elevated platform. It's simply only about how much does it cover in the length of the wall. If the elevated part doesn't even cover 4 tfachim in the length of the wall, then even though, I can put my foot on it and get a little bit higher in one little nekuda, it's not called that, the koisel is less than 10 tfachim. It's not less than 10 tfachim in enough place. Now, you don't have to be mamayit the kaisel on the entire length of the kaisel, but you need to have at least 4 tfachim adjacent the wall, even if it's a very narrow area adjacent the wall. But if it's 4 tfachim long or longer, that's called a miyut. That's the first klal of the Brais. Im yesh v'miyutei arba'a mutter. Mutter will mean, in this case that we're learning, now members of this chatzir can ma'alin from their chatzir to the top of the wall. Mutter lishtamish b'chol ha'kaisel kulei. We don't say only opposite that little ledge that you built. We don't say that because once you have a step that allows you to, with ease, to get up on top of the wall, as long as the length of the step, or maybe people will call it the width of the step, right? Not the depth. We don't care about the depth. As long as the width or the length on the length of the wall is 4 tfachim, then that's a proper portal. And since it's easy to get on top of the wall, then you can be malin to any other part of the wall. But if that section of the elevated earth near the wall doesn't cover 4 tfachim of length, it's narrower, it's like a narrow step, then emish tamish elikeneged hamiyut. This last line is hard to understand. Then it's not called a portal. So you would think if it's not called a portal, then you can't be ma'alin anything to any part of the wall. But here the Brais says, okay, not to the whole wall, but keneged hamiyut you could. And right away the Gemara interrupts that. Why would we say that? If we only consider a step, a miyut has to have 4 tfachim in the length, then if it doesn't have that, then it's worthless. So asks the Gemara, Manashav, if it creates a portal, then because it's not long 4 tfachim, I feel keneged hamiyut nami. So Ravina answers that the Braisa, if the Braisa would have been speaking about someone putting a platform, someone making a pile of dirt, putting stones, elevating the earth near the wall, if that elevation doesn't cover 4 tfachim across the length of the wall, gurnished, you can't even use the top of the wall to be ma'alin because it's not called a portal at all. The seifa of the Braisa is where a person chipped the top of the wall off. Not that you elevated the ground, not that you lifted yourself up, but what other people do, you knock the other guy down. You become more close because you took the wall off. Here is where we say that it's only in the case you removed a chulya, you removed a little piece of the wall from its top. So here is where the Braisa says that even though the area that you removed, and if you were to measure only over there, it would be less than 10 tfachim. If it doesn't cover 4 in the length, at the end of the day, the wall itself, that part of the wall is within 10 tfachim. So here's where the Braisa says you get to be ma'aleh and to bring from the chatzir to that little crevice that you made, or to take from the crevice and to put it into the chatzir, but not to the rest of the wall. It's not a portal at all. But since the wall itself was diminished, there you can get to use it. But coming back to the case of a step, if you're building a step alongside the wall, so here's the wall. The wall is 10 tfachim tall. You're building a platform. You're lifting up. The platform has to cover 4 tfachim on the length. And if it doesn't cover 4 tfachim, if it covers less, you can put your toe on it. It doesn't mean anything. You can't carry up to any part of the wall. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Chiel is giving us innovative ways of elevating the ground of your chatzir. Now, of course, if you were to pack dirt and stones and literally make a mound, lift up the earth by the side of the wall, but he's giving us easier solutions. One solution will be using a keli. You have a pot. If your pot is 4 tfachim long, our big pots have that measurement. Just kafa seifel. Turn over a pot, put it near the wall, and memay it. Now hold on. The havamina is that you simply turned over a pot and you put it near the wall, which means that halachically there would be no issue, and technically there would be no difficulty taking it away. That's not called a miyut. How can you say this? Davar hanitel b'Shabbos, and there's a cloud that davar hanitel the davar hanitel b'Shabbos ain't a memayit. That's the rule. So answers the Gemara Loi. The case of Rabbi Yechiel was tzrichom the chabrei ba'arom. He attached it in the ground, not with cement, not with cement. The havamina here is that he packed earth around that pot. And if you were to remove it on Shabbos, you're going to be moving dirt. And as we learned in Masechta Shabbos, that other than, or let's say, sand in a playbox that was prior to Shabbos designated for playing, earth is muksa. So if you put the pot in the earth in a way that if you were to move it, you will be moving muksa. So halachically, you can't move the pot. So it's not davar hanitil b'Shabbos. And therefore, if the pot is 4 tefachim long, then you got yourself a benefit that you now, the b'nei hachotzer, can use the top of the wall. But now we're going to go into muksa. Guys, we learned also extensively that I know we can't move muksa directly. But if someone is going to move the pot, he's not moving the dirt directly. He's moving the pot. The pot is going to be moving the earth. That's a classical case of tiltul min hatzad, which is not problematic. So we're back to the problem. And this is a, we learned this all together. Pag is an unripe fig, that was buried in straw. We're speaking about straw that's designated for construction. Speaking about straw, that's muksa. And burying unripe product inside heaven, it's like today when you buy an avocado, you put it in a bag. These were different mechanisms that they used to help a fruit ripen. Now the issue is they put it into teven. Can you move it on Shabbos? Or another example, the Braisa gives, if you have a charara, if you have a cookie, the cookie wasn't fully baked, and you put it into coals, don't try that. Because you lose your cookie. They know how to do it, that's going to help the cookie finish baking. Problem is, coals are muksa. Now, can you take it out on Shabbos? So what the Nakuda is, there's a muksa issue. So the Braisa says, as long as some of that which is not muksa is uncovered, which means that you don't have to touch the muksa. You're hopping onto the cookie. You're grabbing onto a piece of the fig. Now, when you move it out, will it move the straw? Yes, it will. But who cares? You didn't do it directly. So it says in the Braisa that niteles b'Shabbos. And the words that we have over there in Shabbos, this is called tiltul min hatzad. Same thing with the pot. If the pot is stuck into the ground, you packed earth around it, so what? That earth is muksa. You're not moving it directly. So the Gemara answers, that the pot, the islay oignayim. Oignayim means it has a rim. Now, if you think about it, if you turn a pot upside down and there's a rim, the rim means that when you look at the keli, there's a little bit of a floor sticking out. It's a rim. Just imagine that. So when you pack earth on it, not only will you be moving the earth, but when you pick up the pot, if you were to pick up the pot, you're going to be lifting the earth. What's lifting the earth? Rashi says, the last line in the Amid, v'doime l'chayfen. That's not tiltul. Tiltul is midrabanan. Isur d'rabanan, you do it min hatzad, you're good to go. I know that any Isur Doiraisa, if you do it Shaloi Kedarko, it only becomes a Derabanan, but you can't violate a Derabanan. So it was packed in a way that if you would be lifting the earth is already called Chafira. Chafira, even Shaloi Kedarko is also Midrabanan. And that's why, since halachically the Keli that Rabbi Yechiel is talking about, that the Seifel may not be nittled b'Shabbos, so it's considered a miyut. Says the Gemara, no. I disagree with the premise. It's not considered chayfer. It's not doimel chayfer. And I know that from a Tanach. The last line in the Amid, that here we're jumping the Braisa, that the Mishnah there is primarily focusing on kalayim. But we're going to speak about many halachas. It was also common then, as we just mentioned, if a fruit is unripe, until now we do that. You put it in a dark place. There's another thing. How do you keep certain products fresh? One of the ways they would keep certain products fresh would be to bury it in the ground. Now, they buried it in the ground in a way that the kavanah was not for it to take root. As long as it didn't take root, there were times that fruit or that vegetable actually increased in size. Without roots, it increased in size because it absorbed moisture from the ground. Now, that might create a problem. So let's go. Hatoim and lefus. Someone buried a turnip or a tzunayin or a radish. And where did he bury it? In order for it to stay fresh, tachas hagefen, under a vineyard. Now, what's the problem? Let's go with kalayim. Says the Mishnah, bisman daf ein zayin omid beis shemixas olin migulen. As long as some of the leaves are uncovered. Now, this migula, the uncovered part, Rashi says, is only needed for the Shabbos detail. For kalayim, even if it's completely buried, for kalayim, we want to know one thing: did it take root or not? If it did not take root, there's no kalayim. But you need to have the olin migulin in order not to have to move the dirt to lift it out on Shabbos. And one of the items that the Mishnah is addressing is Shabbos. But let's begin with that. Lo mishum kalayim. Why not? Because it didn't take root. Lo mishum meiser, gavaldik. We're talking about you already gave meisres. Now I know meisres is midrabanan. So what? You had a tzunayin. You were already mafresh tumas or meisres. But if you planted in the ground and now it became bigger, one can argue it became bigger. From the increase, you have to be ma'asid again. Says the Mishnah, no, you do not, because it did not take root. Furthermore, on Shemitah, we're not allowed to plant. You are allowed to do it on the Shemitah year. There's no worry. Why? Again, because you're only doing it for it to stay fresh. And as long as there is no root, even if it increased in size, says Rashi, I got no problem. And now the third line from the top, and that's Negeh here, V'nitolim b'Shabbos. V'nitolim b'Shabbos means, now for Shabbos, we're not even speaking about uprooting something. There's no uprooting, it didn't take root. And furthermore, Muktzeh, the Mishnah is saying that as long as Miksas Olin Migulin, it's not Doim Elochayfer. At best, there is a muksa issue, but that's called tiltul min atzad. So no, if the pot was inverted on the ground, even if there are rims, which means now, guys, he's saying a radish because when you have leaves, the leaves are skinny. The radish underneath it is much wider. You're going to be lifting the earth. You're going to be lifting more earth than when you have a pot with rims, unless the rim is like the old Borsalino hats. The rim, a little bit. So answers the Gemara loy. That the case of Rabbi Chiel must be the boyim marav hachatzina. It means that you took a pot or a bowl, a seifel, and you fixed it in the ground so strong that without a keli, a hoe, a chatzina, without a digging keli, you can't get it out. Digging on Shabbos, my friends, is also doiraisa. Okay? And that's why it's not a davar hanitel b'Shabbos. But the point that we are going into, albeit again the next Amud and a little bit into the Afayin Ches, is that now that we established that if you have a koisel ben shnei chatzeros, and from one side it's gevaya asara tvachim, but from the other side it's less than 10 tvachim, that chatzer benefits the usage of even being ma'alin to the top of the wall. So let's figure out other systems that can be mama'et for one side, allowing them to use it. Now, next. 2 dots. Sulam HaMitzri, an Egyptian ladder, Ein Mamayit. However, Vahatsuri, a Tyrian ladder, right from Tsoir, Memayit. What does that mean? What does that mean? Heichidami Sulam HaMitzri, Amri Deve Rabbi Yanai, a Sulam HaMitzri is a little ladder, a ladder that does not even have 4 rungs. Kol she'ein boi arba'a chavakim, if it doesn't have 4 rungs, that's not Mamayit. Now, why not? L'chora. Because of the cloud that we learned on Amud Aleph, that kol davar hanitel b'Shabbos, we are allowed to move a ladder on Shabbos, even though it's leaning against the wall. It's not called a miut, didn't diminish anything, you can move it away. What, and if it has 4 rungs, what, you can't move a ladder, and if it has 6 rungs? When my time of the Solomon Mitzvah, Amalei, Lashmiel, Hoda, Amar of Achamarada, Amar of Amnun Amarav, Bishum the Havali Davar Shenitul Shabbos, and Becholah Shabbos, Enamamait. Well, if that's the case, Yachi, Afilu, Tsoiri, Nami, we are allowed to move a ladder on Shabbos. So the Gemara says that when we speak about Davar Hanitel b'Shabbos, we have to look at 2 things, halacha and practicality. If something may be moved halachically, but people de facto normally don't move it, Why? Because it's heavy. That's the chiddush. Hassan, the reason why a sulam tsuri is yes memayet koivdoi koivoi koivdei metachov. Its weight, it's heavy. So now with Gavaldics, now we got it. In other words, if I'm going to put down my cabinet chest that is heavy on the side of the wall, all I need to know is, especially Lerashi, I don't care how much out does it go from the wall. I only care about the length of the wall. If it's length on the wall 4 tfachim or more, it makes, that's called a portal to the top of the wall. That's less than 10 tfachim. The ganze top of the wall belongs to my chatzar. Now, what happens if both sides do it? We'll get to all these cases soon. But let's go weiter. Amar Abayim, Koisel shemen shtei chatzeiros, Gavoy asar tfachim, v'hiniach sulam rachav arba mikan. The sulam rachav arba mikan. Both sides did it, and he's going to hold they did it properly. It's a ladder, let's say koivdoi. It's weight, a ladder that people don't move. It has the rungs are 4 tfachim long. And now we're learning another very important klal. And the klal is like this. The words that Rashi uses is miyut ba'avir lo yishmei miyut. If you were to have a wall, and near the wall you would put a piece of furniture that's very heavy, but the bottom of the furniture is not on the ground. There are legs, and the legs go up 3 tfachim and more. And then there is a beautiful shelf. That's b'chlal not memayet. There is a shelf. It's ba'avir. Miyut ba'avir laf shemei miyut. You have to have something that's on the ground, or using the rules of lavud, at least within 3 tfachim, within less than 3 tfachim off the ground. So that's another key. A ladder, right? There's different types of ladders. You can have the ladder that ever used by Napoleon's march. That whole ladder is laying on the ground. But when you say a ladder, what we imagine a ladder, so there's only 2 little shtekelach on both sides. The rung, if the lowest rung is 3 tfachim or more off the ground, it's worthless for these dinim. Worthless. I don't care if it's 4 tfachim long or if it's 100 tfachim long, the length. It has to be resting on the ground. So that's the case. It was talking that. So says Abaye that and the aim being zeh shloisha tfachim. Another detail. Not only is the lowest rung within 3 tfachim off the ground, but the top rung is also within 3 tfachim from the top. What does that accomplish? That means that the chatzir, there's no wall at all. There is b'chlal no wall. There's no wall on this side. It's memayit it. And there's no wall on the other side in that direction, because there's like this ramp. We're going to view it as a big ramp. And therefore what? Abaye is not even referring to being malin to the top of the wall. He's referring to something much more important. If that's the case, then these 2 chatzeiros can join an eruv. Now, are they obligated to join an eruv? No, because this is not more than a chaloim or a pesach that's in the wall, which is the name of the Perek. But he's taking the din of miyut to another din. That if you have a koisel that's gavoy asar tfachim and there's no chaloim in between it, then ma'arvin shnayim ve'ein ma'arvin echad. But now that we're learning about reducing the height of the wall, if you reduce it to the point that in one area of 4 tfachim width, it's keilu, you go up straight to the top of the wall. It's mamish. How is this different than a door? So memayet, and you can join an eruv. However, shloisha ain't a memayet. But at the moment, it's not within 3 tfachim. If there's 3 tfachim or more of a gap, then it's not considered a portal. And furthermore, v'lo yamaron, then it must be a line 3 tfachim. Dolo have a koisel arba'a. Avol have a koisel arba'a. Afilo muflak tuvanami. If the thickness of the wall is 4 tfachim, then even if the top of the ladder is not within 3 tfachim of the top, It's less than 3 tefachim. It's a lot less, but there's no more 10 tefachim. You were mamayit it. Then we say, since this becomes a portal, because in the area of the ladder, there's no 10 tefachim of height. If the wall is thick, I don't even need for both of these ladders. Another. I have to add something over here.
Is that because you could walk along the top of the wall?
Very, very good. The top of the ladders. Very good. That's the word. I'm sorry. The top of the ladders for you to be allowed to be ma'arev from one side to the other side. The ladders have to be aligned towards each other. It's not the top rung to the top of the wall. I made a mistake. It's not the top rung to the top of the wall. It's the ladders have to be either facing each other mamish, and if it's unaligned, it cannot be more than 3 tefachim away. And on that, we're adding now, if the top of the wall is 4 tefachim deep, which means it's easy to walk on top of the wall, then I don't care if one ladder is in one end and one ladder is in the other end. Since there is a place on both sides that the koisel is not gevaya asara tefachim. Why not? Because the ladder is memayet. Because the ladder is memayet. So you can get up here, it's like a chaloin, and you can walk on top of the wall and walk down the other ladder. Then both chatzeros can join the eruv. That's it. In other words, you don't need the top to be within 3 tefachim. But I said correctly that the lowest rung has to be less than 3 tefachim off the ground. That you need. Because a miut, ba'avir, laf shemei miut. But the moment you go up there, can you join both chatzeros? If the top of the wall is less than 4 tefachim, then they have to be aligned. And if they're unaligned, we tolerate a unalignment of less than 3 tefachim, lavud. And if the top of the wall is thick 4 tefachim, then I don't care how distant one top of the ladder is from the other. If you build a platform and the inherent problem with the platform, if you can see a picture, it's like a stool. A platform is something, right, that many times has 4 legs, and the legs go up, and then on top of it you have the shelf. So if you build a staba al gabi staba, the upper platform has legs, the bottom platform does not. So now, if the length of the bottom platform, a picture would be very helpful, has 4, then you don't even need the top one. Then you do not even need the top one, then memayet, because if from the top of the bottom platform, there's less than 10 tefachim, the platform itself is the minimum 4 tefachim across the length, that's the bottom one, then you're good. However, what happens if the length, what's aligned on the wall is less than 4? But the yesh be'elyoina arba'a. Now, who needs the bottom one? I'll tell you who needs the bottom one. Because if the platform of the larger one is 3 tefachim or more off the ground, even though it's resting on 4 legs, this is called a miut ba'avid. Miut ba'avid, laf shmei miut. But what we benefit here is that if the ein bein zelozeh shloisham, if in between the top of the lower platform and the bottom of the upper platform, if it's less than 3 tefachim, so it's lavud. So we can view the top of the upper platform as if it's resting all the way on the ground. And even though where it rests on the ground, it's narrower, that's the chiddush here. As long as any part of the platform, even a part that's above 3 tefachim off the ground, if that part has the minimum length of 4 tefachim, you got yourself a proper miut. So now we learned another nuance over here. We need the lower platform, because the top platform is called a miut ba'avid. The lower platform isn't taking up 4 tefachim length on the wall. I don't care. I don't care that the length of this platform, the minimum length, is higher up. As long as it is considered something that's resting on the ground, any part of it that goes 4 tefachim or more in the length, then we only have to measure to the top of the wall from that upper part. And if it has less than 10 tefachim, then it's going to be mamayet. Next case, similar, sulam, a ladder, shesheli voice of poichos, that its rungs are individual rungs. not the Rebbe's Napoleon's March ladder, but a normal ladder. In other words, here again, we have to make sure that the lowest rung is very good, not the one to the left, but a ladder, the one to the right. It's called that the rungs are flying in the air. Like this. If I'll call this now the width. If the width of the bottom rung is 4, which means it's going on the length of the wall 4, then avada, if that in itself is enough, if you were to measure from the bottom rung to the top of the wall, there's already less than 10, you were mamayit. But even if the lowest rung or the bottom, the lower rungs are not 4 tefachim wide, they don't go 4 tefachim across the wall. Let's base ourselves on the previous case of the platform on top of a platform to say the same thing over here. As long as one rung, even the top rung, has this width of 4 tefachim, it grows lengthwise 4 tefachim, as long as including that the bottom rung is within 3 tefachim off the ground. Loved. So we consider the top rung resting on the ground. It's not a miud ba'avid. From that rung that has 4 tefachim length, measure to the top of the wall. If now it's not 10 tefachim, less than 10 tefachim, that is mamayet. That reduces the height of the wall. Mamayet. And therefore, again, let's say in a simple case, if the chutzner on the other side has no such ladder, so this is your case where the koisel is within 10 tefachim from one side, it's 10 tefachim or more from the other side, and as we learned in Ramadan, this noislan lazem shetashmish toinichai, and therefore they will be allowed to be malin to the top of the wall. Let's have one more case. Ve'omar Rav Nachman, Omar Abba Baravua, Daf Ayin Ches. Here we have a ziz, we have a ledge that is going out from the wall 4 by 4. And guys, this is the shaila, this is the question that everyone challenges Rashi, that Rashi explicitly said that this whole din of 4 tefachim is only on the length of the wall, on the length of the wall. It doesn't have to go out over here. It only has to go on the length. Why here do you have to have dalid al dalid? But let's go. Let's keep on going with Rashi. Now, see that ledge? Very good. In the picture. The ledge per se is not considered the miut. Why is it not considered the miut? Because we have this cloud that miut ba'avir lav shmei miut. In the case, it's not resting on the ground. So even though it has 4, and from its topper part, there's less than 10 tefachim to the top of the wall, you don't have anything. However, v'hiniach sulam kolshu, you put a ladder, the width of the rungs of the ladder can be kolshu, not 4. As long as the ladder is leaning on the ledge, not like on the picture, by the way, on the picture that you have up on the screen, the ladder is near the ledge, it's not enough. Has to be leaning on the ledge. If it leans on the ledge, same concept. The ladder takes away the problem of miud ba'avir. Now you have to have arba'ah, you got arba'ah. The arba'ah is higher up, who cares? Like we learned in the 2 prior cases already. Then invited miyatoi. But here the Gemara clarifies, Ke'ilu, someone had that picture on the screen in their minds, and we are excluding this picture. In other words, you have to lean the ladder on the ledge. Then it's mamayatit. But if the ladder is leaning near the ledge, like in the picture, it can be mamish touching the ledge, but it's not leaning on it, then we say that only arvache, that we consider the top rung, the rung that's aligned with the top of the ledge, it makes that even wider. But that does not accomplish anything because we don't care how wide the top of the ledge is. The ledge in itself is already 4 by 4. That is not enough. So now it's going to be 8 by 4. Now it's going to be 50 by, it's garnished. It's still called miud ba'avid. What we need is to have this ledge considered resting on the ground. And for that, the ladder becomes its extension if the ladder is leaning on it. And just giving a mashal that the Rebbe is up there in the heavens, so to say, Baruchnias. And if we want to bring it down to the ground, we want to bring the holiness, so Hasidim have to lean on the Rebbe. When you lean on the Rebbe in a healthy way, that is what connects, so to say, that which is up there in the heavens all the way down here to the earth. God willing, to be continued.
Shkoyach, shkoyach.
Oh, yeah.
You're laughing. Got my